Hello, everyone. My name is Sien, and I'm a member of the Pink Singers, London's LGBT plus community choir. The Pinkies has been going for nearly 40 years now, and we have a long shared history with LGBT History Month. We performed at the launch of the very first LGBT History Month in 2005, and we performed every year at History Month events since then. I guess the exception really was last year when coronavirus first hit. But a year down the line, it's February 2021, and we're still, unfortunately, in lockdown. We knew we couldn't sing and support the event as we usually do, and so we decided to do something slightly different to mark the event this year. Back in 2005, I think when it came to LGBT History Month, we were fighting for the acknowledgement of a hidden LGBT plus narrative in recorded history as it exists. But in 2021, we recognize that history is not the sole province of the great and the good, and it's certainly not the sole province of the people who write the history books. No, we have our own extraordinary histories. The Pink Singers is a choir which brings together people with a shared love for performing. But within that umbrella, we're a very rare thing, a truly diverse group of people with a wide range of ages, genders, sexualities, ethnicities, socioeconomic backgrounds, and more. So in 2021, these sisters are doing it for themselves, and we thought we'd look at LGBT History Month through our pink tinted lenses by surfacing the rich and varied stories of our own community, whether they're active singers, resting singers, or Pinkies alumni. And we're going to extend the invitation to the wonderful people in the many LGBT organizations we've worked with in the past. With that in mind, I can think of no better person to kick off our festivities than Sue Sanders. Sue co-founded LGBT plus History Month UK with Paul Patrick in 2004, and it grew out of her experience as a drama teacher in schools and universities in the UK and Australia, and her role as chair of the charity Schools Out UK. She's delivered equality, diversity, LGBT awareness training to schools and universities, and also worked with the criminal justice system, setting up the first LGBT independent advisory group to Scotland Yard in 2000. I have to say that, I have personally had the pleasure of speaking on a panel addressing access of BAME LGBT plus people to the criminal justice system, thanks to the platform that she created. In 2015, she received an Emeritus professorship from the Harvey Milk School. And in 2019, she was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Rainbow Honours Board. Speaking of Harvey Milk, I remember watching the film Milk in the cinema back in 2008. And then stepping out into Leicester Square afterwards, I remember talking to the people I was with and wondering where and who our local LGBT plus heroes were. Well, thanks in part to Sue, I am now aware of the many giants on whose shoulders the UK LGBT story stands. People like Wolfenden, Wildblood, Mellors, and Walter. And to that roll call, I would actually add Sanders. It is Sue's tenacity and drive for diversity that I admire the most, and she is really one of my personal heroes. I can't wait to hear her talk, so let's have a pink round of applause to welcome Sue Sanders.
Yay!
Woo! Take it away, Sue.
Thank you very much indeed. That's truly lovely. I think you're all into the Kahoot now, so what I'm going to do is play a little quiz game with you and give you some information on the way, hopefully. So I'm going to take myself off the camera so I don't blow my mind as I'm working. And we'll catch up at the end, and I'll take questions and we can chat afterwards. But this hopefully will be a bit of fun. So enjoy. So you'll have information. We go 3, 2, 1, and then the first thing pops up and it says no need to answer. So you've just been told all this, so bless their heart. The Harvey Milk Institute, becoming a professor of that was quite wonderful for me. Having failed my 11 plus, failed my A levels, never going to university, it was kind of wonderful that Stuart offered me the professorship. So being able to flash professor sometimes can be quite useful, and it gives me a buzz anyway. So a little quiz. And I can't imagine that many of you will get this wrong, but there is a trick in there. So have a think and press what you think is right. We're whisking through. I should have noticed how many people. I think we've got about 42 in. So when we get to 40, I think we should be there. Brilliant. Yay. Absolutely 100% right. I put in October so that we can also tell people that probably you all know that October is also LGBT History Month in the States. And so it does mean that we can get 2 LGBT History Months into the year, and we can also get 2 Black History Months, because while we're celebrating LGBT History Month here, America is celebrating Black History Month. So I don't know how we can get a winner when most of you got it right. So anyway, let's go on to the next one. So this is a really important slide, and Hussein is sort of linked to that. I have been always absolutely passionate about making sure that LGBT History Month celebrates the complete diversity of our community. And this used to be on our very early Schools Out websites. And we did this long before this fabulous word intersectionality came up. And if we've forgotten something, the idea is that somebody tells me and we add it to the list, and we try and find out why did we forget it. Very important when I'm doing work in schools and in education to get people to recognize, and also the media. The media are very good at not remembering this, it has to be said. So another little question. And there are 2 potential answers. Yay. Well, it's a bit of a trick question, because we launched it in 2004, and the question one was, when was it launched? So those of you who said that, but those of you who ticked 2005, that was when it first started. So for a dyslexic, I really have set myself a challenging little challenge, because I have to start thinking about the launch in November and the year ahead, and I can really get myself into a delightful place at some time. So we have been going really since 2005. So this makes it our 16th year. So we've got a little change in the numbers now. So here is the picture of the first event that we did it in Southwark. I was living in Southwark at the time, and we asked the gentleman who was just appointed in Southwark to be the LGBT officer to help us find a place to launch LGBT History Month. And he found us the Tate Modern, which was pretty wonderful. And that really has set us up for all our launches, are always in very wonderful, prestigious places. Now, you can see, I hope you can just see, here are the platform, which was very thin because it was a cinema, but I had 13 people on it. And the reason I had 13 people was to make sure that people really understood that I was serious about diversity. So I had 3 trans people. I had LGBT people from a variety of ethnicities and religions, LGBT, and able-bodied and disabled, and also a heterosexual ally. So I was trying to make the point from the word go that we really were serious about the diversity. Now, I suspect you'll get this because it was mentioned just before I started talking, but it's just a very simple thing, true or false. So yes, Paul, Patrick and me kicked it off, and we kicked it off for a variety of different reasons, really. 2003, you'll remember, was the end of Section 28. And for those of you who don't know anything about Section 28, whoopee. And for those of you that do, you'll know what a problematic and difficult 15 years we had because of it. It was a real problem, Section 28. And here is me with my present partner. I think this was almost our first date, going on a march, holding a Schools Out poster talking about real families. And Schools Out produced the Real Families poster because you might remember in the Section 28, it said, "Thou shalt not teach the concept of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship." Absolutely appalling. So we were trying to make clear that, you know, we are in a family and we are families. The list of titles here may be banned because at this point we had no idea what the word promotion meant. And it's very interesting. Promotion wasn't a word that was in the legal constructs at all. It had never been used before, so we had no precedent to know what it meant. Did it mean that local authorities who funded libraries wouldn't be able to have these books? That theatres that were funded by local authorities wouldn't be able to put on gay plays? Nobody really knew. Peter, in Outrage, many other organisations up and down the country fought against Section 28, and it really pulled us all together. I think one of the powerful things about Section 28 was how much we all pulled together and fought against it. And you might remember the big march in Manchester. It was a phenomenal event, but in a sense, we almost shot ourselves in the foot, because the irony was, it was a law that said thou shalt not promote homosexuality, but it was in the Local Authority Act. Now, one of the things that everybody was scared of, and in fact, the whole point of Section 28, as far as the Tories were concerned, was to try and stop work being done in schools. And schools had been doing a lot of work, as had other organisations. But the irony was, Thatcher had also passed the Local Management of Schools, which actually meant that the local authorities didn't have an effect on schools. So technically, Clause 28 did not affect schools. And I went to the NUT and checked whether that was right. It was. And the NUT sent out a solicitor's letter to every school telling them that. But for those of you who were teachers or went through those 15 years will know that not everybody got that message. And lots of teachers went back in the closet. Lots of schools never mentioned LGBT. And when asked, teachers said, no, I can't mention it and I can't do it. So, what we wanted to do with LGBT History Month was move away from the victimhood that Section 28 had given us and move into celebration. And this is Paul. Now, unfortunately, you can see he died in 2008, and he's been a great loss to me. And you can see him there with Ian McKellen. Now, Ian and I worked together on the arts lobby. I was also not only am I a teacher, but I also worked in theatre a great deal. I was a drama teacher, as indeed was Paul. And therefore, I knew lots of people in the theatre, and it was at the Drill Hall that the arts lobby used to meet and discuss and decide what we want to do. And Michael Cashman was there, Carol Waddis, Mavis Seaman, Julie Parker, all sorts of wonderful people. And we dreamed up all sorts of things, but also learnt how to fight legal. I mean, a lot of us, Julie and I, had been on many marches, been at Greenham, knew how to campaign, but didn't really know how to deal with the actual legal situations of Parliament. So we had to learn a lot. But Section 28, as you know, was there for 15 years. But Paul and I did lots of work together. Throughout the whole time of Section 28, Schools Out was very active. We had a very early website. We ran conferences for LGBT teachers, and we produced lots of resources. This year, or rather last year, Tony Fennick took over when Paul died as my co-chair, and unfortunately he died last summer. It's a great loss to Schools Out. And Steve Boyce, who had been with me for many, many years, worked with me and Paul, and we went to a big conference in Finland way back in the late 80s, early 90s maybe, looking at homosexuality. He felt he needed to leave to retire. So we've had to set up almost a new group to set things up. Now, here's a face that a lot of you will recognize. Lynn has become chair of trustees. As you know, Schools Out is a charity, and Lynn has stepped into Steve's shoes and has done amazing work to make us shipshape. And we did need a lot of work. We weren't as good as getting the policies out as we could have been. So Lynn's really stepped in and done a massive amount of work to get us set up properly. Max has been with us since the beginning, and she was an old NUT president. Professor Ian Rivers has written many an article on tackling homophobia, and he's up at Strathclyde University. And Sophie has just joined us and become our treasurer, much needed, making sure that we're all shipshape as far as money is concerned. Here is the backroom team. Now, you probably are all aware we're all volunteers. Seth is part of the UCU union and was very much helping us getting an amazing poster together, which is now also a website, which I urge you to have a look at, which is Voices and Visibility. and it is actually fully accessible. We've just alerted the RNIB to it, and they're very excited about it. Mazie Barker has been with us for many years now, and she's does a lot of work around writing and help us promote, and is often picks me up on details that I've forgotten, for which I'm very grateful. Andrew does all the work, our promotions, and if you've gone on our Facebook, you'll notice that Andrew changes the banner every day and does all sorts of wonderful things on Facebook and Instagram. And he's just very excited, as am I, that we've just hit 3,000 on Instagram. And I think, I forget what our Facebook numbers are, but they are phenomenal. Kate is also a member of the Diversity Role Models, and it keeps us very clear around our trans inclusion issues. Much needed at the moment, because you'll all be aware that trans are very much under attack at the moment, which is very serious, and Schools Out is working both behind the scenes and in front to make sure that the human rights of trans people are being respected. Mikhail is one of our newbies, is a new teacher and has just joined us this summer. Adam has been with us some time, and he's a writer, he's our poet laureate and has his own publishing company as well. Dr. Jeff Evans is the person who set up our associate organization, which is Outing the Past, and I'll tell you more about that, which is our LGBT festival. Nikal is a new teacher as well, who's just joined us. Nick is our resident photographer, and Nick holds the record of never having missed a launch of LGBT History Month, which is more than I can say. I've had to be in the States a couple of times. So Nick has been at every one and taken photographs. And if you go on to LGBT History Month website, you'll discover the Flickr with lots of his photos. And Andrew has put up a lot of YouTube videos. So there's lots of ways that you can see what we've been doing in the past. Beth is the person who's redesigned our current LGBT History Month website and makes sure that that all works. Steve is the person who does our theatre, and I'll tell you more about that. He looks after, makes sure that we've always got original theatre on the go. Lila is our Zoom queen and has taught us all how to use Zoom and Kahoot and SurveyMonkey and everything else, which is quite wonderful. Abdin is a new member and has just joined us and is a doctor. And he did his first presentation yesterday for Outing the Past, telling us about where the whole issues of LGBT issues in the NHS are. Jenny is the person who does the website for Outing the Past. Ken does our academic conference, which we hopefully have every year, but may not happen this year, which is a more in-depth look at LGBT history. And Caroline is the person who looks after the Gazette for Outing the Past, of which I'll tell you more about later. So all these people, not paid, all do all this work to make sure that LGBT History Month, the classroom, Outing the Past, Schools Out websites, all that free information is available. So it's a massively important team. All do it for the passion and love. So, question. You're probably aware that we have a theme every year. All these are themes that are either our current one or our past one. Do you know what our current one is? I think I probably need a Pink Singers song that I can play as people do this. Oh, we've got up to 48 people now. Fantastic. Okay, so mind, body, and spirit. Yes, this is what we're doing this year. And the art behind the lens, which some of you have noticed, is actually next year. And the other ones have been in the past. So Art and Politics is coming up. Art and Behind the Lens and Art and Politics is coming up. Poetry, Prose and Plays was last year. So you'll find information about these two on the website. And once we start working for the next 2 years, that information will come up as well. Pip's doing well. Oh, look at that. Very exciting. Okay, so here we go. Mind, body and spirit. Now, all these posters that you'll see on the website have been designed by Andrew, and they're all free and they're all downloadable. So you can add them to your leaflets, your information, anything that you're doing, you can use them. Or if you want to take them into your work to tell other people, you can print them off and put them up there. The whole point is to make it as easy as possible. And the whole point of LGBT History Month is to work from the grassroots. And the whole point of it was, you know, we set up a calendar on the website so everybody could put up their own things. And the first few years, we didn't do any events at all. All we did was to facilitate other people doing things. So it's very, very much grassroots. So over the themes over the years, now we didn't start the themes until 2011. We've organically sort of built and changed things and made hopefully it more accessible and more useful. So that we came up with sport those first 2 years. When Britain got the Olympics, it suddenly occurred to us that maybe this was a really good opportunity to think about LGBT people and sport. And it took us, you know, we thought, well, we probably need 2 years to raise the awareness of things. And if you go on the website, you can see the resources that we produced for those 2 years. They're not very wonderful. However, this year, the BBC is actually having something every day this February, either on the website or on radio or on television, celebrating and discussing LGBT in sport. Now, that is just, you know, breathtaking to me. You know, we could never have done that back then. So things are really shifting. You'll notice that all these themes are actually linked to the curriculum. So STEM, STEM is science, technology, and mathematics. And, oh, I should tell you where we had them. So our launch for sport was at the Oval Cricket Ground, and then at the rugby in Twickenham. At STEM, our focus was Alan Turing. So you won't be surprised to know we actually were at Bletchley Park, and we had a relation of Alan talking. It was quite amazing. We had tours around and we saw where Alan had worked. Music was a doddle. So many LGBT people are music, both current and past. History was a doddle. I think we were in one of the universities for that. Religion, belief, and philosophy was interesting. Some people felt that they were very cross that we looked at religion, belief, and philosophy. But again, we're passionate about diversity. And I've said, well, there are LGBT people who are religious, and we need to celebrate that. And we also need to challenge the religions that give us a hard time as well. And we certainly did both of that in the launch at Cambridge University. Labi Safri sang and was very powerful about challenging some of the religions. And we had members of the cloth talking about how they supported LGBT people. Geography, we had Jan Morris, and if you don't know about her, then it's worth looking her up, but it was very important to have Jan for geography. Prose, poetry, and plays, again, a doddle, so many LGBT people. And PHSE, mind, body, and spirit. So the next question, I suspect, is going to be, oh, no, it isn't. I'm going to tell you about this, and then it'll come up. So the badges. Those of you who know me will know, around this time of year and before, you don't get out of a room until you bought a badge. So I'm hoping that after this is finished, you'll pop up to the shop and you'll get yourself one. But these are all the badges over the years. So the first 4 years, all we did was change the color of our second logo. Our original logo was designed by Gillian Spraggs, and then the second one was designed by Tony Malone. And then we had the idea of going to a university and getting the badges designed by students. So it was put on the curriculum of the University of London for the graphic arts, and I would go along and explain what the theme was, explain what we wanted, that we wanted a design that would work on a small badge and on the side of a bus. So they would design it, we would look at it, and we would choose the one. It then shifted to the University of Bedford, and then last year it was Goldsmiths, and then next year, very excitingly, we're doing a national competition inviting primary school students, secondary school students, youth groups and university students to design a badge and send it in. And Tony will be one of the judges to choose that. So I'm really excited to see what they come up with that. So question, yes. So we also have people that we choose to represent the LGBT. So we have chosen somebody for mind, body, and spirit. But the other three who aren't being used this year, you will find information about them on the LGBT History Month website. So they're all lesbians who we either are current or are coming up. Is that somebody wanting to ask me a question? Did somebody ask a question I didn't hear? Right. So Lily Parr is the person we've chosen. Yes, absolutely. And the reason that we've chosen her is that she is very much into being body. Oh, got a change of winners here, which is all very exciting. Okay, so Lily Parr is a footballer, and I'm told that there was I'm not sure whether it was a radio or TV thing that the BBC did some coverage of her, which is very exciting. She was a professional football player before the war. And in those days, the women professional football players would play both male teams and female teams. And it was said that she had the most amazing kick. She was also an inveterate smoker, which is kind of interesting. In 1921, the Football Association banned the women professional game, which was perfectly outrageous. So the Dick Kerr ladies, of which she was a member, Dick Kerr was organizing a factory. So lots of them were working in the factory and then would also play professional football. They went off to America, played a few matches there, went to Canada, but came back. But the whole thing sort of fizzled out after that, which was a terrible shame. And then she retrained to become a nurse in a mental health institute. She lived with her partner most of her life. But finally, she is now in the Football Hall of Fame. So they have finally recognized her. And there is also a lesbian football team called Lily Parr's. So who do we choose for our gay person, our gay man? Again, these are all on our website. So it's just a question of choosing which one we've got for this year. But the others, if you want more information, you can certainly find on our website. So it's Mark Ashton that we have chosen. And I'm going to tell you a wee bit about Mark. Oh, it's shifting around. It's very exciting. So Mark, if you've seen the film Pride, you'll be aware of the amazing things that Mark did. He was the gentleman who started off the whole concept of lesbians and gays supporting the miners when the miners were on strike in the 80s. And the reason that he did it was that he could see how the Tories were treating LGBT people appalling and also treating the miners appallingly. And he wanted to make connection and to support them because he said, you know, we're both being treated badly. We need to work together to fight this and to support each other. And it was an incredibly important thing he did, because what it did was really wake people up to the recognition that the issues of lesbians and gays in the workplace was really important. So after the strike was finished and people recognized just how much LGBT people had done to support the miners, the union, the National Union of Miners, went back to the TUC, the Trade Union Council, and got them starting to think about LGBT rights in employment, which they had not been doing much of. And Schools Out was started way back in 1974 by a bunch of gay teachers. I was not one of them, nor was Paul, who got together socially to support each other, because as gay teachers, they had no support whatsoever. The unions weren't the slightest bit interested. In fact, they were quite dismissive of them. So it's really interesting to see how Mark's work has made a massive difference to the whole union movement. And of course, now Schools Out works very closely with all the unions, and we're always at the Trade Union Council, the LGBT conference of the Trade Union Council every year. So who is the bisexual or stroke ally person that we've chosen to represent Mind, Body and Spirit this year? Again, you can get all the information about these people on the website, irrespective of whether they're the person that we've chosen this year or not. Brilliant. Oh, people have been looking at the website, definitely. That's great. And it keeps changing, which is all very exciting. Okay, so here's Maya Angelou, an amazing writer, a total pioneer. I mean, it would be easier to say what Maya hasn't done rather than what she has done. She is probably the first Black woman to do so many things, but her writing is phenomenal. If you haven't come across I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, then give yourself that joy. A firm and powerful ally against racism, against misogynism, against disableism, and against homophobia. Absolutely amazing woman. and well worth looking up and discovering more about. So, you know, do yourself a favor and do that. So who's the trans person that we've chosen to represent the theme?
I wondered if I could jump in with a quick question while the
answer.
Sorry.
Go for it.
I'm just wondering what the reasoning behind grouping bi and ally together is in that way.
Very interesting question. I think one of the reasons is that bisexual people are often very invisible. Sometimes
I would say that makes them more invisible in this way.
Yes, well, maybe the intention is not to do that. So the intention is to make them both very visible, and to say that if you feel that we've made them more invisible, I can only apologize. That wasn't the intention. The intention was to make them very visible. And maybe we can have a discussion about that later. But thanks for the question, and that was our intention.
Happy to chat.
Good. So Michael Dillon is the person that we've chosen this year. The others are all, again, as usual, you know, you can get more information about them on the website. So Michael Dillon, fascinating person. Cheryl Morgan just did the most great, a splendid piece on him at the Leeds event yesterday on Out in the Past. And he's a very, very early person to get to transition. He started off in life as very much in Cambridge as a rower, was captain of the rowing team as a woman, and then eventually found a way to transition. Very, very difficult at that stage because there was very few role models whatsoever. And he was also new Roberta Cowell. So he met with very early doctors who were beginning to recognize the need to think about how they can support people who felt that their bodies were not appropriate to the how they've been perceived. So Michael is a very important person. He also went off to get a couple of degrees. He became a doctor. He was a doctor in the Navy for a while, and then he became very interested in religion, and then he went to India and became a Buddhist. So you can't be more mind, body, and spirit in a sense than that. So this is a multi-select, so you can have as many or as few of the ones that you want. So we're thinking about, what does the plus sign represent in LGBT? And you're thinking, you know, I'm doing this to a specific LGBT audience. This has been designed to do both be fun for LGBT people and also educate in schools and in groups of people that don't know so much about LGBT. So yeah, they're all, as you probably all clocked, they're all under the plus sign. And of course, there are many others that are now, it's one of the exciting things about the younger generation. They're throwing up more and more ideas, challenging the labels more and more, which I find incredibly exciting. So all this is changing massively. So we then get to, okay, so who have we chosen to represent the plus identities for the theme? Now, unlike the other three who we hadn't chosen aren't on our website. So you'll need to go to either the archive that we recommend on the LGBT History Month website, or choose Wikipedia, or there's a brilliant thing called Queer Bio, which you'll get more information of. But at some point, I'll try and get the rest of them all up. So again, Cheryl Morgan was talking about Mark Weston yesterday. He was an intersex person. Another athlete, he represented Britain in the Olympics as a javelin thrower, discus thrower, began to discover that he just did not feel comfortable in his body and began to recognize that he was intersex. And again, eventually found somebody who could help him through the position. But you know, it's very early. So it's a really interesting situation. And he then married the love of his life. So Out in the Past is our festival of history. And we have been doing this now for 6 years. Dr. Jeff Evans came to me after we'd been running Schools Out for 10 years. He was on the Schools Out committee at the time, and said, you know, where is our history? So we've been running LGBT History Month for 10 years. And while amazing and wonderful things are happening, quizzes, theatre, conferences, etc., we're not gathering much history. And he had this idea of actually having a festival. So we held the first one in Manchester. We had an event where he'd asked a few people he knew to do some presentations for the general public, which we did in the People's History Museum and the Manchester Library, and then for academics at the LGBT Foundation. Plus, he also went to Steve and asked him to do a piece of theatre. And he did the most incredible piece of theatre, which was looking at, in a sense, almost the Stonewall that had happened in the 1880s in this country, where a drag ball had been raided by the police and a whole bunch of people had been arrested. Unfortunately, many of them then went to jail. But Stephen did this in 3 sessions. So the first session was actually in a bar in Canal Street, looking at a cabaret and then the police coming in and raiding. The second session was in the library, where he was exploring how the press and some of the people who were involved in this were connected. And then the fourth session was at the People's History Museum, looking at the actual trial. So it was an amazing piece of theatre. And the thing that I love about theatre, and obviously I am a drama teacher, so I am passionate about theatre, is it's a way of learning through your heart as well as through your brain. This year, we've got 18 virtual hubs. Of course, they are all virtual because of COVID. And as I mentioned, we had the first one rather, in Leeds yesterday, which was absolutely stunning. It was a very long day, but completely fascinating stuff. I've just watched the Charleston one, which they've just put up, and it's a video that you can go and look at any time. Very exciting and challenging artwork from Duncan Grant, full frontal nudes. And there are all sorts of other things. So you can go on the Out in the Past website or LGBT History Month website and discover them all. They're all free. And enormous thanks to Zoom. They've given us the licenses. So if you're interested in real history, then, go for it. You've got an amazing chance. How we do it is we put out a call for papers every summer and ask people to offer papers. 70 people last year offered us presentations. Well, clearly, even though we have 18 hubs, we're not going to be able to show all 70. So what we've done is we've offered people to put their information about those presentations up on the website. So if other organizations want to involve those presenters, they can. And eventually, we're hoping to get a lot of those filmed and put up on the website so you can watch those presentations, so we don't lose our history. So there you go. This is LGBT history. And I hope that you feel part of it. I mean, Goddess, the Pinkies have been, as you so rightly said, at so many of LGBT events, both our official launches and at other events that people run. And that to me is the joy. If you look at the calendar, there are the most amazing, exciting, creative things that lots of people dream up and make happen. So I'm hoping that you do feel very much part of LGBT History Month. And this is the organization, as I mentioned before, Schools Out, that does it all. So we've got the Out in the Past website, the History Month website, and the Classroom website. And you can go to all those websites and find them. And that's it. So we've got Chappers is third. How exciting. Helen is second. Yay. And the spotlight goes to QI. How exciting. Whoa. Great. Well, how was that? Was it a piece of nonsense or did you find something useful?
Thank you very much.
That's great.
It was very interesting. And I'm very glad to see that we've explored the theme for this year as well. I know, it was Keita who won it. Fantastic. Well done, Keita. So it's Kiki then. So we're going to take some questions now.
Sure.
If you want to ask the question, either pop it in the chat or raise your hand and we'll get round to you. But I already have a question from the chat. This is from Jeremy. He asks, Sue, I recently heard a lecture about intersectionality, social justice, and critical theory, where identity was placed above humanity in a hierarchy of values. Perhaps it is my age, 50, and the fact that I'm cisgendered, and perhaps some white fragility, but I balk at this. What are your thoughts on this complex issue?
say that again, because I hadn't heard this, so I'm a bit bewildered.
I think maybe Jeremy, if you're around, if you don't mind speaking, I think it would be it might be worth you trying to explain.
Hi, Sue. Thank you so much for a really inspiring talk. So I've recently, last few years, become a teacher at college, sort of further education colleges, teaching drama type things.
Oh, how exciting. Oh, good.
There's obviously, like, since Black Lives Matter, Me Too, identity politics is very much on the kind of pedagogy curriculum.
Yeah.
And we've got anti-racist ally groups at college and inclusivity teaching practice groups. I'm 50, I'm cisgendered man. I've probably got some white fragility there as well. I was at a lecture and they were talking about a kind of pedagogy that's to do with social justice and intersectionality, and above humanity on the system, on a value system, was placed identity. And
I'm sorry, I did say at the very beginning I'm not an academic. I got the professorship and totally erroneously on some levels.
yeah.
I don't understand, to be frank. I mean, I know that we're facing a lot of backlash at the moment. You'll be aware of Truss's comments about, who's supposed to be our equality minister, who is talking about this fashionable stuff, and that we shouldn't be doing LGBT and black and sex, but we should be doing economics. Well, my answer to that is we didn't get the Equality Act until very late. I mean, Labour were talking about the Equality Act in 2003. It didn't happen until 2010. And by that stage, they were losing a lot of power, and the Conservatives came in and fiddled with the bill, and economics was there, but they took it off. So, but it's waiting. It could be popped back on. It could be, but so, I mean, Joanna doesn't know her history. I don't know whether this is an attempt to challenge that, or whether I'm just not understanding. But I have to say, I can't quite grapple with the suggestion. Yes. I probably wouldn't go for a hierarchy. I would suggest that both are important.
Me too. And maybe it was a lecture that was sort of provocative rather than saying this is the way it has to be. You know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Sue. So we have a couple of questions from David. He asks, given the lockdown, have you managed to reach out to even more schools virtually over 2020? And how's it gone down over Zoom? And he'd also like to know whether he can ensure that his old schools are involved in this. How do we help, and where do we find that out from?
Well, certainly lockdown has meant that people who have clocked on to Zoom have really got me involved. I mean, I think I've got something like 20 presentations to do this month, which there's no way I could have done if in real terms, because I can do 3 a day or maybe more. I've done one school, which was great fun, and I've done some universities. How we reach out to schools, I think, is very much been done by the NEU, the National Education Union, have really worked hard to link up with the LGBT teachers, and they have apps now for LGBT teachers. So I pop information on there, and I think the LGBT teachers have really grabbed the month to make it happen. I think the unions are a really important source to get the information out and get people involved. Some schools are doing brilliantly and doing lots. Other schools, zilch. I mean, I was talking to a young woman for CBBC, and if you go onto the Facebook, Andrew is trying to put most of the links up, and the CBBC link is there. And I was talking to this young woman. I don't think that the BBC put this in the final film, but she was saying she had heard nothing about LGBT people from her school at all, and they weren't celebrating LGBT History Month. She was a member of the Proud Trust, one of the youth groups. So that's how she got to hear about it. So it's incredibly patchy. Some schools are doing brilliantly, others are doing zilch. So I think we have to keep pushing it. Those of you who are parents, those of you who are thinking about being chairs of governors, that's a way in. Finding out what your local schools are doing, giving information. There's all sorts of ways to continue the pressure. but I think, you know, we cannot be in any way feel that the job is done, because it hasn't. And we're also dealing with a very, very, very strong backlash at the moment from a very right-wing government, and also some very problematic people within our community who are challenging the trans issues.
I was just going to follow on with that, based on that subject, because clearly you've been through a lot of LGBT activism over the decades, and there have been issues which you've managed to fight and win. And a lot of people think that the major battles have now been won. But what do you see as the main challenges facing the LGBT community today?
Well, very definitely the trans issue. It feels like Section 28 all over again. I mean, the guidance that the DFE just recently put out for sex and religion, or relationship and sex education, was absolutely outrageous. It wasn't legally binding, but I think, not unlike Section 28, which didn't affect schools, technically it did affect schools. And I think some people read that guidance and got very worried. And a very strong anti-trans group used that guidance to write to every school in the country, making a list of organizations which said, you know, given this guidance, you can't now have a variety of LGBT groups coming into your schools, which of course was totally wrong and totally erroneous. So we've got a lot of work to do there. I think the other biggie for me is the fact that we're still not got people to recognize the full diversity of our community. So it is still very white, and it is still often very male. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done to get the full diversity of our community visible.
I have a question from Keita. She asked, does the charity collaborate with publishers much, either to co-author or edit or advise new history titles?
Well, that's very interesting that you should ask that. Yes, is the quick answer. And I did have a book that I had been supporting by my side, but I may have put it away because I'm doing a lot of all the badges. So if you buy a badge today, it'll be me who pops them in the envelope and sends them off. But there's a brilliant book called Pride, which is being designed for schools, which I wrote something for, and certainly spent a lot of time making sure that it was diverse. I mean, when they first sent me the first cover, it was a picture of Harvey Milk. And I just said, oh my goddess, this is for English schools, and this is a white man. So can we really rethink this? And they've done a brilliant job. And I might just zip away from the screen a minute and bring it to you so you can see it. I've also discovered a brilliant book by a woman called Chris Shane, who's an American, who's done a superb book looking at how schools and teachers can challenge homophobia and be inclusive. There's a great book, cartoon book, by Kate Charlesworth called Sensible Shoes, which is a wonderful book doing LGBT history, all in cartoons. And I've reviewed that. So if you go onto the LGBT History Month website, I have reviewed some books. And of course, there's The Big Gay Adventure, which has just come out, where there's a chapter in there where I talk about what it's like as an out teacher. I was out in the 60s as a teacher, and I sort of talk about what that was like. And there's also another article which I wrote for a Finnish journal, which is a much longer one, really explaining how I set up LGBT History Month and the whole thing there. So you can go on the website, you can get some reviews, and you can get some articles from me. There's also a very interesting article, if you wanted to know more, Goddess help you, about Section 28. Gillian Spraggs and I wrote that at the end of 88, beginning of 89. Thank Goddess we did, because I mean, if I was to write it now, I wouldn't have all the details. But it is a very detailed, comprehensive article about how 28 came about and who did what to whom, in a sense. So it's worth having, if you wanted to know more, it's worth a read.
Thank you very much, Sue. I think we have time for one more question. Does anyone want to ask a question? Please put your hand up.
While you're doing that, I'll just zip and get that book. Hang on a second.
Last chance, ask a question.
Sue, can I ask one question?
Yes, go for it. That's the Sensible Shoes. That's all cartoons, and it's just wonderful. And I can't find the other one, Pride, but it's reviewed on the website, so do have a look. Sorry, your question.
So Sue, this is going to be a slightly unfair question.
Go for it.
But obviously, you know, you spent so much time thinking about LGBT history, and you thought about so many different characters throughout history who've influenced our queer history. But if you were just to pick one, and I'm not going to ask you for your favorite, but if there was one you think everyone on this call should go away and read about, because maybe it's something quirky.
Very simply, I think Maureen Calhoun, who's just died, and there's some interesting articles about her. And she was our first out lesbian MP in this country. And it's interesting because lots of people don't know about Maureen. Everybody assumed that Angelou was the first lesbian, and Angelou always said, no, I wasn't. But the story of Maureen, I think, is a really interesting one about how she was treated, what the left did to her. And I think it's an interesting one because she's a sort of forgotten person. And she's accessible at the moment because everybody's writing about her because she's just died, which I find very painful. You kind of think, well, goddess, we should have been talking about her when she was alive and thanking her for all the work. But that so often happens. We sort of wait until somebody dies and then say how wonderful they were. And I keep thinking, that isn't the way we should do things. So one of the things about LGBT History Month is that we can celebrate and talk about people while they're together, but we do put obits up as well, obviously.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right, everyone. Does anyone else have anything that they want to ask at the moment?
Well,
I think
Michael Derrick here. Can I just say, Zoom has made me go dark again. About Maureen Calhoun, her story is being told on the BBC recently.
Oh, was it? Oh, good.
Oh, yes, it's been on news stories. And they tell her story and they say how she came out. And then they say she lost her seat at the next election. And it does make it sound as if she lost her seat because she came out. But in fact, there was a big swing to the Conservatives that year, which is why a lot of Labour Party people lost their seat. And the swing to the Conservatives was less in Maureen Calhoun's seat than the average swing to the Conservatives. So she did rather better. Well,
that's brilliant to hear that. Thank you so much. That's definitely worth knowing. Thank you. That's a fabulous piece of information. You see, this is the thing about doing things like this. You always discover something more. And when you share information, somebody says, yes, but I've got another. It's like putting in more pieces into the jigsaw.
And Sue, I just wanted to sort of maybe make an observation, really. I think, we often talk here in the UK about LGBT as a way of sort of striping the community or giving identities to people within the community. And there's an argument for using a more umbrella term such as queer, which obviously has pejorative implications. But at the same time, the use of an umbrella term also then tends to diminish or erase people's identities within that umbrella. So, for instance, I think, going back to the presentation around the idea of bi representation and putting bi and allies together diminishes the representation of bi people. And I mean, our community, certainly the Pink Singers, has a lot of bi identifying people within it. And I'm just wondering how, I know we talk about diversity, but what is the best way to ensure that we create a community, but also give enough space for these individual identities to shine?
I think that's a fabulous question. And I think we're still learning. I mean, I think we're still discussing whether with the people we choose, whether we actually give them, we say there are LGBT and T and plus. I mean, we tried plus this year, we probably won't do it another year. We're constantly learning, we're constantly trying and explaining stuff. And I totally take on board the challenge that I got at this afternoon, and I will take it away and have a think about it. But I think one of the issues that you're so right, that the language that we use is so crucial and important. And when you consider that we've still got 35 Commonwealth countries where being LGBT or using that term is not accepted. But then when people try and come back into this country and ask for asylum seeker, the assumptions that the Home Office make about LGBT are informed about LGBT concepts here. And they're very narrow. So they don't think about what it might mean to be LGBT in another country. And you're so right, the language is not helpful, because it will then assume particular types of attitudes and knowledge, which will not in any way transmit to Africa or India or other places. So language is a problem. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think trying to find language which is inclusive is one of the challenges. And I think, you know, I read a very interesting article saying that plus was very unhelpful. And I had to sit there and think, well, yes, I can totally make sense to understand that. I use queer. I wouldn't have used queer 15 years ago. It was, you know, it was a highly problematic term. So I don't think in any way that we have solved the problem of finding an inclusive term, which everybody will feel comfortable with and that everybody will recognize themselves within. Because I think, you know, we are incredibly complex as human beings. And language doesn't do justice to our complexity. And I think we have to recognize that language changes, it shifts, and we have to move with it and take on the chin when people say that's inappropriate, it doesn't work, please change it. And I think, you know, we have to constantly recognize that it is something that we have to do and to take on board.
Thank you very much. I think, Lynn, you have just one thing you wanted to add, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Just so pinkies, I don't know, necessarily do know or do not know this, but my sexuality went on a journey and I identify as bisexual rather than as lesbian. And you all know my wife and a lot of you went to my wedding. But I identify as bisexual. And one of the reasons for coming on to Schools Out was to increase representation. And it's one of the things for next year that we will be doing a lot more work on, because it isn't something historically that we've done amazingly well through the past. So it is one of the areas that we know we need to do some work on. And that was one of the reasons for me coming on board to take that one forward. So I just wanted to reassure the bi and pan members of the community that are on here that it is something that we'll be taking forward. And should they want to get hold of me to have a discussion about it, I'll put my email in the chat function. So that's just what I wanted to add.
Bless you, Lynn. That's really important. And I think, you know, I hope that people recognize that as an organization, Schools Out is very responsive to discussion and criticism. I welcome it because I think it's a chance for us all to learn. And I don't assume that we've got it right, because who can get it right? You know, things constantly shift.
So I think I want to say on that note, thank you so much for coming to speak to us today, Sue. It was brilliant, really entertaining and also very informative. And I think we've had some really valuable discussions. Thank you again for being here.
Well, thank you, Pinkies, because you have been such a big supporter of LGBT History Month. And I so look forward to having us in reality again. And I think what I must do is see if I can take some of the records you've got and see if I can get a song that I can use so that we've got some music going down, apart from the dreadful thing that Kahoot gives us. And just my last point is badges, people. I'd be so grateful if you would buy or lanyards or both. The more you buy, the cheaper they are. And I say it is me. You have that little connection, should you wish it, with me, because it's me that stuffs the envelopes and takes them down to the post office. It may take a couple of days. We have had snow today, so I'm not sure how easily I'm going to be able to get to the post office tomorrow. It might not be until Wednesday when it's supposed to thaw, but I might be able to get out there tomorrow. But bless you all, and I love your singing and I love what you do. So it's great that we have this important, powerful link.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause for Sue.
Thank you.